I noticed when I stopped trying, and the strange thing was, nothing collapsed. I expected something to fall apart. I expected something inside me to demand attention. I expected effort to be necessary, but it wasn't. Not loudly, not urgently, just quietly enough to go unnoticed. There was no dramatic moment where I gave up, no clear decision, no single realization that made me release control. It was smaller than that. It was consistent. It was subtle. It was gradual. From the outside, nothing seemed different. I still spoke when I needed to. I still answered when someone asked. I still smiled when it made sense. Nothing about me looked like I had stopped, and yet something inside me had. Not suddenly, not defiantly, just quietly enough to soften. I noticed it in the spaces between reactions. The second where I would normally adjust myself. The pause where I would usually correct a thought. The moment where I felt discomfort and didn't immediately try to improve it. That was new. Those moments didn't feel lazy. They didn't feel careless. They didn't feel wrong. They just felt unforced. I was still aware, still present, still engaged. But I wasn't tightening around every emotion. Thoughts came and stayed without being edited. Feelings surfaced without being refined. Reactions happened without rehearsal. And nothing broke. I could move through an entire day without mentally replaying every exchange, without optimizing every response, without measuring every internal shift. Nothing felt abandoned. Nothing felt neglected. It was more like relief without drama, as if I had been carrying invisible pressure, and then slowly, without ceremony, I had put it down. Everything around me stayed the same, but the way I related to myself had shifted. I paid attention to how normal I still looked. I nodded at the right moments. I laughed when it was expected. I participated without withdrawing. If someone had asked what changed, I wouldn't have had an answer, because nothing visible had. That was the unsettling part. I had always believed trying was necessary, that effort held everything together, that vigilance prevented collapse. But when I stopped trying so hard, everything remained intact. It wasn't indifference. It wasn't exhaustion. It was something quieter, a loosening, not because I stopped caring, but because I stopped forcing care into control. I noticed it in repetition, the same routines, the same conversations, the same expectations, everything recognizable, yet lighter, not because the world became easier, but because I stopped wrestling with it internally. I didn't fight every thought. I didn't correct every emotion. I didn't analyze every reaction, and nothing spiraled. That awareness changed something. Because once you realize that constant effort isn't required, you begin to question how much of it was fear. I began to see how often I had equated effort with worth, how trying felt productive even when it was unnecessary, how constant adjustment had felt like responsibility. If I wasn't improving something, I assumed I was neglecting it. If I wasn't refining a thought, I assumed I was being careless. If I wasn't managing every reaction, I assumed something would slip. But nothing slipped. Nothing quietly unraveled in the background. Nothing required emergency repair the moment I stopped monitoring it. That realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt steady, like standing without bracing. Like breathing without controlling the rhythm, like allowing a moment to pass without reshaping it afterward. And the more I allowed that, the less I felt the need to interfere. Everything continued as usual. Time moved forward. People spoke. The world kept its rhythm. And I moved within it, without bracing against every moment. I noticed it in my own voice. Not in what I said, but in what I no longer rehearsed beforehand. I could enter a conversation without preparing a version of myself. I could leave it without replaying it for errors. That was unfamiliar. The schedule made sense. The tasks were ordinary. The responsibilities remained, but I felt less tension beneath them. Not because I had solved anything, but because I had stopped micromanaging my inner state. Even simple feelings felt different. What to improve, what to fix, what to optimize. The urgency faded. I didn't need to perfect every reaction to feel stable, and that awareness was subtle. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a revelation. It was quiet. And because it was quiet, it felt real. Sometimes I noticed how automatic trying had been, how deeply it was woven into my identity, how effort felt like safety. And now I wasn't gripping so tightly. I didn't explain it to anyone. There was nothing to announce. But I carried that softer posture with me, quietly, through the same rooms and the same hours, aware that effort had loosened. There was nothing to fix, no hidden flaw to correct, no immediate improvement to make. The absence of trying didn't feel reckless. It felt spacious. It moved with me in small ways, in the pauses between thoughts, in the silence after conversations ended, in the quiet moments before sleep. I let the days unfold without pre-adjusting myself for them. I didn't force clarity. I didn't rush growth. I didn't pressure understanding. I let it sit there, quietly, as something that didn't need to be managed. Sometimes I forgot I had stopped trying, and then I would notice it again. Not as passivity, not as surrender, but as steadiness. The strange thing was how stable everything remained. People still spoke the same way. My routine still held together. My life still moved forward. Nothing collapsed. Nothing fell apart. And yet, something inside me had relaxed in a way I hadn't allowed before, as if I had mistaken tension for strength. Not a dramatic change, not a visible shift, just less resistance. The stillness didn't grow louder, it didn't demand attention, it simply remained. And maybe that was the point. Not every part of you needs constant effort. Some parts stabilize when you stop interfering. They don't demand control. They don't demand correction. They simply function when left alone. Not loudly, not urgently, just steadily. Nothing around me needed improvement. Nothing needed to be forced into progress. I didn't need to try so hard to keep everything intact. I simply continued, aware that the moment I stopped trying, I started trusting. I noticed when I stopped trying, and nothing fell apart.